Quick housekeeping before we get started. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll send everyone a link to that recording within a few days after the webinar. We're monitoring Twitter, and you can tweet with us at Cardiolog. If you have any comments or questions, you can send them through Twitter. And of course, if you have any questions that you want answered during the webinar, just send them through the questions box in the GoToWebinar panel. And at the end of our half-hour webinar, we'll go ahead and answer all of your questions. In regards to the agenda for today, we'll start with a short introduction. For those of you who don't know who Interlock are and so forth, we'll do a quick hello, and then from there we'll jump right into our topic, which is how we can use analytics to bridge between IT and business. Go into a short demonstration, and as I mentioned, we'll conclude with Q&A, and again, send those through the GoToWebinar questions box, and we'll get all your questions answered as well. So quick introduction, Interlock. We've been around for 10 years now, since 2005. We're based out of Boston, and over the past 10 years, we've been focused around web analytics and engagement tools designed specifically for internal platforms. So while there are lots of great products out there for marketers and public-facing websites, Cardiolog focuses on SharePoint, on intranets. We can track all versions of SharePoint and also other third-party tools, whether if it's Yammer, Citrion, CRM systems, and so forth. That's a brief intro about who we are. And if we jump right into our topic for today, we'll talk about IT versus business, and we all have our own personal stories, but in many, many cases, what we've seen with our customers is that IT and business aren't always as friendly as we would hope. Sometimes there are struggles between these two departments. Sometimes it's not as easy to work together, and there are many different reasons why, but let's dive a little deeper into that topic. So the first thing that we oftentimes see is that business users have a lot of requests from IT. Some of these requests might be, how can we track productivity within SharePoint? Or which groups are most active in SharePoint? What content is most popular? Or maybe more importantly, what's least popular or not being used at all? And this all comes from really good places. At the end of the day, these business users, they spend a lot of time and efforts building out their sites, if they're site owners or HR or communications folks and all the different business users. They spend a lot of time and effort to create their content, whether if it's blog posts or information for employees and so forth. And they have a lot of questions. Is anyone actually using that content? Is it being read? And so forth. At the end of the day, these business users are kind of helpless if they can't get that information, because if they don't know what's going on, they can't make changes, they can't improve, and they can't keep at it. Whereas if they would know that they're getting lots of traffic to their blog post, I'm sure they'll gladly continue to bust out that wonderful content. Whereas if all of a sudden they find out no one is reading their blog posts, hang on, why is that? Do people not find those topics engaging? Do they not know that the blogs exist and so forth? So these business owners want to make sure that all that time and efforts they're putting into SharePoint, into their sites, is really worthwhile. And so we have all these questions towards IT. And then IT get these questions and they're not sure what to do. And at the same time, they oftentimes have their plates full as is. They have lots of technologies that they support. They have lots of responsibilities. Finding out for the business owners what sites are most active or who's using SharePoint might not be their top priority. And so they're at times a little baffled and they're not sure how to help IT. At the same time, IT also sometimes has demands from the business users. They have different things they expect, right? If there's a governance strategy or governance plan, they expect business users to follow them. They oftentimes want feedback around SharePoint. And of course, if there are different limitations in hardware and so forth, They oftentimes limit business users in that sense as well. And then again, if we talk about that struggle or conflict, then oftentimes business users are frustrated. Not only do they not get the answers they're looking from IT, but they also get different requests and so forth from IT. So here, users are saying that IT requests so much from us, where they usually expect IT to help them with those requests. That's a little bit of background into our story that we're talking about today, which is that struggle between the IT folks and the business team. But at the end of the day, there's really a mutual interest here. At the end of the day, we're all spending a lot of time and efforts and budgets into SharePoint. And we all, whether if it's IT or business, want to make sure that SharePoint is a success. It would be great if we can go to management together, business and IT, and show how worthwhile investing in SharePoint was, being able to show that it's really boosting productivity and helping our organization move forward. So we believe that the way that we can solve that conflict between IT and business is really talk about that mutual interest. And we're going to see how we can leverage analytics to prove that unity and really close the loop between IT and business and close the loop in all the processes that we have within SharePoint. So how can analytics help in this case? Well, the bottom line that oftentimes we start out with is the fact that you can only manage what you can measure. So when we talk about those business users who are creating content within their environment and creating those resources for the employees of our company, they can only really manage once they know what's going on, once they can measure. And if we dive a little deeper into that, what exactly do we want to manage? So things like adoption, right? If we're launching, for example, for migrating, that's a good example, and we have a new version of SharePoint, a new intranet, the best way to show that it's effective and that it was worthwhile is to make sure that adoption is high. And if it's not, then right away we can take action to improve adoption. But if we don't know what's going on, we can never take actions in order to improve those adoption levels. Productivity, oftentimes a key focus or key reason why we're building an intranet and migrating to new versions of SharePoint. We want to help our employees be more productive and allow them to be able to get more done over the course of a day and so forth. Collaboration, another key. Oftentimes we're going to build things like team sites and my sites to allow our employees to collaborate. Today's teams work from different offices and even different countries, and so tools such as SharePoint, specifically team sites, will allow us to better collaborate, share information, share calendars, and things of that sort. And so our business users want to make sure that employees are taking advantage of those great tools and improving collaboration. And then finally, another great area that we want to be able to measure and improve is in the user experience. So how can we really ask the users if they're satisfied with SharePoint, if they're getting the most out of it, and perhaps if they have feedback on how they want to change things. Maybe they want new features or additional content or easier access to forms and so forth. So if we can get more feedback from these users, we'll be able to improve SharePoint as well, as opposed to what we see with many of our customers who only improve when they're migrating every few years from one version of SharePoint to the other. The goal here is to really constantly improve SharePoint for our users and not wait 3 years till we migrate to ask, hey, what's going on? How do you like SharePoint? In order for us to make those changes. All right, so up to now we talked about the challenge or that conflict between IT and business. We talked about the joint efforts or how we might want to work together. And one of the great ways that we can connect between business users and IT is really to provide a self-service analytics and engagement engine. If we can allow business users to be independent of IT and give them all the answers to their questions, they'll be happy and they'll be able to answer those questions and improve collaboration and engagement and all the things we talked about up till now. And at the same time, IT won't have to stress out over having additional tasks on their list of things to do. Business will be completely independent and able to do all of that on their own. So let's dive into a few examples of how analytics can help us to answer the requirements we saw earlier from our users. So for example, if business wants to ask what links and buttons are most effective, we can easily answer that. And a great example would be navigation bars. So if you take the home page of our intranet, it's fairly limited with the amount of links that we can have on it. We don't want to be too complex, that navigation bar, or overflowing with links. And if there's specific links not being utilized, we can swap them and link the content that's needed. And here, for example, a click map. Here you can see each of the links on this page is highlighted, and it shows us how popular those links are or how unpopular they are. So again, if there are links not being clicked on very often, let's swap them and use that space on our home page to link the content that's really needed by our users. Another example, talking about adoption. So how can we track adoption? How can we show that adoption is increasing? Which importantly, step in if adoption is not increasing or not at the levels that we expect. So for example, tracking unique users. And here you can see the top users. And on the flip side, we can see which users do not use SharePoint as often. So maybe offer them more training and more support to improve their adoption rates. Another example, how can we track departments? So if we have a fixed amount of training budget, instead of offering all of our departments the same amount of training, let's pinpoint that training towards the groups and departments who aren't using SharePoint as often. And so here, for example, you can see a report that's showing us all of the groups. You can see at the top the most active groups, and at the bottom we can see the groups that are not using SharePoint as often. So again, target them with more training, maybe provide them with more support in order to really improve their adoption rate. Influential users. Once we can find out who they are, we can provide them with more training to turn them into evangelists and so forth. And we can easily see here who are those influencers within our organization and really go back and find out how they're using SharePoint to duplicate that with other users. Content, if we want to find out what's most popular or least popular, we can find that out as well with the help of analytics. And again, allowing our business users to take the next step to make changes. So we find out there are a bunch of sites that are not very popular, not used at all, we can get rid of that content. Search. A huge part of any intranet these days. Search allows us to find content that we can't find and so forth. And once we can analyze search and find out what content people can't find, we can help by surfacing that content. And so the key is to make sure that we are aware of what content people are looking for. So again, if we have perhaps an area on our homepage which has the top 10 links for the intranet, now we can actually make sure those top 10 links are really the content that people might not be able to find. So the idea, let's improve productivity by saving folks those many seconds that they need to use to find the content, or instead of searching by having a nice big link on our homepage, people can easily find that popular content. We talked about being able to better communicate with our users, being able to ask them how are they using SharePoint, or how do they want us to improve the portal, and of course collect feedback as well. To do so, we can leverage surveys, on-page surveys within SharePoint, and right there ask our users what's working for them, what's not. And so again, the goal is to constantly improve SharePoint based on how it's being used, based on that feedback that users are providing us. And then another example, business users want to make people aware of specific content. If I have a new policy that everyone needs to read, or maybe a CO blog post and so forth, by leveraging things like message bars, we can make sure folks are aware of that new content. Just a little bit of background on how we can connect between our business users and IT. Let's jump into a quick demo and show a few of the examples in real time that we're talking about up till now. All right, so here in this, again, this is a completely self-service dashboard which any business user can use. All I do is click on Add here to drag and drop metrics I want onto my dashboard. I'll take page views chart, for example, as well as a list. We'll make the date range last month. All right, so here in this list, you can see I'm showing the most popular content within our environment, but you might want to show your users what content is least popular, what has not been viewed at all. So we'll come here and change this to 0, the minimum value. And here in this scenario, you see all this content that has not been viewed at all over the course of an entire month. So we can either archive this content or maybe delete it if it's not needed by our users. We can also filter by content types. If I want to take just documents, let's take sites, for example. Here I get an overview of all the sites within our organization. And here you can see, for example, I have 2 sites here that haven't been viewed at all over the course of an entire month. So the people not need the content, they not know about it. If they don't know how to get to it, let's put a nice big link on our homepage to the HR site, for example. Another example, let's take unique users, as well as groups of users. So under unique users, you can see all of my authenticated users and who's using SharePoint the most. And also, for example, groups. If I scroll down to the bottom, right away I can show you who are the groups who do not use SharePoint very often, and then pinpoint them with more training and more support. And then finally, we'll include with search. Let's take the search phrases report. Here we can show exactly what folks are searching for, what can they not find, what has low click-throughs and so forth. Again, the idea, better understand what folks are searching for in SharePoint, and then surface that content to make it easier for the users to find. At the end of the day, all these metrics are actionable, so they allow you to take action based on how SharePoint is being used. We talk about this being self-service, so I'll click here at the very top on Generate Report and show you how we can easily share this data with colleagues. All right, and then here we have a report in generated mode. At the very top here, I can easily share the data by exporting to PDF, CSV, sending as a distribution list, or even creating a web part. So I can actually have a web part on each and every site showing the site owner data for his or her site. And those web parts are constantly updated with data, so very easy to share that data with our colleagues. And then we talked about leveraging things like engagement tools. So here on the SharePoint page at the very bottom right, you can see this survey that appears. So again, the idea is to ask for that real-time feedback from users as they experience SharePoint. So not only do we collect data around usage, but also we can ask them for that feedback and collect the feedback as well. If I jump into a different page here, so here at the very top of my page, you can see this red bar that appears as an example for a message bar. Here we're talking about a fire drill. So you want everyone to be aware of this. So beyond just sending them an email update with a fire drill, we're also going to make sure it appears right on the pages within our SharePoint portal. So very, very easy to share information, to engage with users, and to collect their feedback as well. All right, so that was a quick introduction to how we can leverage analytics to help connect between IT and business, how we can help answer those requirements that business users might have. And I'm happy to spend the last few minutes of our webinar today to answer any questions, so feel free to send them through in the questions box. For now, let's see, the first question. So Dan is asking if this works for SharePoint 2013 and SharePoint Online. The answer is yes. This tool works with all versions of SharePoint, regardless of if it's on-prem or in the cloud.
ISV story, which I said now is going back to.
All right, so I see that's all the questions we have for today. For now, I thank you for taking the time for joining our webinar. As we mentioned earlier, we'll send the recording to all of you as well. So thanks for joining, and I wish you all a good day.